Who is ready to keep this interview series rolling? We are bringing on some amazing AI leaders, and today is no exception. I'm bringing on AJ Schneider. He is the former president of Wheaton Worldwide Moving. He currently is the CEO of Schneider Communication Group, and he also serves as vice president of communications and public relations at AMA Indy, which is the American Marketing Association Indy chapter. And today we're going to talk about MARCON. It is the first marketing conference here in Indiana, the first MARCON that's happening. I'm very excited about that. We're going to talk about AI, marketing, communications, and so much more. Let's get to the interview.
Welcome to the AI for Everyone podcast.
Welcome to the program.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, I always say this, but I always mean it. I'm excited for this conversation.
Good. So am I.
Because we're going to talk about AMA, American Marketing Association, their conference that's coming up here in literally, as we're recording this, it's less than 20 days. What's the date?
October 9th.
October 9th?
Yes.
Oh, it's like 7 days from the recording of this.
Yes. Yeah, it's coming up fast.
You just put me in a panic because I'm on a panel there.
Yeah.
But this is the first conference of its kind in Indiana by AMA. Let's talk a little bit about it. What is it? Why was this made? And what can people expect?
Yeah. Well, for a long time, there have been other sort of prominent AMA chapters around the country that have had annual conferences. One in Oklahoma City that's particularly prevalent, and we kind of took the MARCON branding. Our conference is called MARCON from the Oklahoma City group. I was just at the Ignite conference in Cincinnati, put on by the Cincinnati AMA chapter. All really well established, and our current president, Jamie Shook, who's the marketing director at Wheaton Worldwide Moving. She kind of, when she came on board as president, she really wanted to make it her mission to kind of bring us up to that level and start, our own tradition of having that annual conference. And so this is our first foray into it. And one of the things that when we really started to discuss what did we want to do with this conference, and you and I have talked a little bit about this, is to do a little bit less theory and a little bit more actionable sort of conversations, to have actionable conversations. And I think people will be very pleased, with the slate of speakers, including yourself on a panel. We've got some heavy hitters in the Central Indiana marketing community, all who have really interesting things to say about the state of marketing today, and everybody has a little bit of a discussion about technology, AI included. But I think the goal was for people to walk away with as much actionable information as theoretical information. And maybe that's a good segue into a broader conversation about the theory versus the practice. And I think one of the things that you and I were kind of talking about earlier is this idea that, particularly in the realm of AI, when you have these discussions, I certainly feel like I've witnessed a lot of conversations around it, but in the end, most of the information really isn't for that particular audience. If you're a small or medium-sized business, there are tremendous tools, particularly in the marketing arena, in the AI realm. Things that can help you with content, things that can sort of guide you to what you should be, the kinds of things you should be saying to a particular audience, things that make you more efficient. All very useful, actionable tools. But I think the other part of the conversation, and as time goes on, when we start talking about data and crunching data and using AI to really help guide your cadence and teasing out audiences that that maybe be based on certain behaviors that they're exhibiting, whatever. You have to be really careful with that. I certainly wouldn't recommend to people that they use a ChatGPT, for example, and turn it loose on a company's customer data. That can be a dangerous thing. Two people sitting in cubicles next to each other, both using ChatGPT on that data, are very likely to come up with two different answers, and you can't risk not having consistency in your output, in the results. I think what happens is that we confuse the conversations for much bigger companies that have a different sort of set of resources that can develop proprietary tools to look at their own company and customer data. um, and that's great. I mean, but those are two different things. And I think we're doing ourselves a disservice if we don't start sort of separating that conversation, because that ends up being a very ethereal conversation that if I don't have the resources to develop a proprietary tool, that's really not going to do me much good. Sounds great, but it's not actionable.
Yeah, I agree because there was a story that just came out a month or two ago where people were using projects in ChatGPT in the team version and they were sharing those projects and that actually got indexed in Google. So even though you might be on a paid plan or even an enterprise plan, you don't know. And that's why you have to have governance at your company. You have to make sure you have AI policies. And you're so correct because what Eli Lilly's going to use is much different than what your and my consulting businesses are going to use. Now, it has equalized the playing field in a plethora of ways, but when you're talking about something like customer data or credit cards or any type of data that you can't let leak, you can't just be throwing that stuff in ChatGPT.
Right.
You just can't
Right.
do it.
Yeah, and I think the security piece of it, obviously huge. What you're referencing, but I also think the consistency. I think people forget, like, if even if you just experiment with it, um, you know, using the internet and say, show me, if you're typing a prompt into Chat GPT and ask, if you ask for a particular set of data about something, um, let's say you're asking for a particular set of data on the real estate market in a particular place, Austin, Texas, right? If you wait 24 hours and use an identical prompt, you could get a different result, than you did the day before. Well, imagine that same situation if you're using on customer data or whatever. I mean, forget the security part. You might be led down a different path than you were the day before, and I think that could be problematic. So I think that's an important consideration.
And this is why the human in the loop is so important because right now I'm watching way too many marketing professionals that are jumping in their chat GPT, they're copy and pasting, they're flooding LinkedIn or whatever platform that they're on with what we call now AI slop. That's a term that's kind of stuck on. And I'm sitting back going, look, the whole key of using AI, in my opinion, is to make people question if you're even using it or not. Like
Yeah,
your content is so good, he has to be using AI, but I don't see the same patterns as the slop that's out there. So we need to bring our what I call wisdom to the table, right? When you look at AI, all it is data. It's ones and zeros, right? That's put together into a knowledge base. But knowledge is worthless until the human comes in the loop and actually applies something to it. And those of us in marketing understand, especially us veterans in marketing, you understand how complex human behavior is. What makes somebody click a link? What color kind of persuades somebody to click a link? All these different things that AI might be able to kind of tell you, but you don't really understand until you are deep in the trenches and you start seeing all this stuff for yourself and you start applying that wisdom to everything. And that's why it's so important, I think, for a conference like Marcon, for an institution or an organization like AMA to be out there because we need to make sure that the next generation of marketing professionals understand this.
yeah, yeah. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I thought they brought up a really good point, and I think you do a really good job in your discussions about the we'll generalize and call it the prompt itself, right? In other words, um, learning how to use the tool in a way, to your point, that doesn't seem like you're using the tool when you get the output, I think is really important, and that's the new version of knowing how to write something, for example, right? With a beginning, a middle, and an end. If you're writing an article, if you don't, you need to know what that output ought to look like at the end of the process. And so if you're using generic prompts, and you just accept what comes out of it, very likely you're missing that human nuance that you're talking about. I will say, I mean, this is going to sound soapboxy. I I do fear for a generation of people, obviously younger at this point, who are not concentrating on what you talk about, which is how to use the prompt and how to get out of it an appropriate output. I fear for them because, again, let's use writing as the example. They're not being schooled. They're skipping over what makes a good article. Let's say, right? What the beginning, the middle, the conclusion. Um, getting how do you weave a story from point A to point B to point C, all the way to Z. If all they're doing is letting the tool, create the output without any guidance, along the way. I mean, the tools are pretty good. So even if it comes up with a decent article, you've learned nothing in the process. And
Right.
so without that tool now, those people are going to be really stuck. They're going to be paralyzed because they don't know how to do it themselves, right? They're not practicing that discipline. And so I fear, that's my only soapboxy thing I'll say about it. I do fear that there's this group of people who are just, with they're going to be not functional without the tool. And again, I think the converse of that is why it's so important to have your baseline of understanding before you jump into it, and then learn how to use the tool appropriately.
Yeah, and I think I know. I don't want to say I think I know. Words have power. That we
Yeah,
really have to instill in the younger generation the art of communication again. And I know this
100%.
is what you've spent a big chunk of your life doing, right? And what you help people with. But communication is going to be key because the Gen Z generation, especially, that they don't even really speak English sometimes, right? They were raised in an emoji type of communication world, but the future of AI is not going to be these big meta prompts that we're doing today. It's going to be you're just going to talk with your AI agent. And if you can't communicate effectively with that AI agent, you're not going to be able to produce the output that you want. We're really going to need to start instilling more. And I don't see enough AI, quote unquote, experts, whatever, talking about the soft skills that are going to be so crucial to staying viable in a workforce that I personally think we're not going to recognize in 3 years.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And in fact, I think, when I talk to people from a sales and business development consulting perspective, um, I really look at that almost as an opportunity to bring a little bit more analog, if you will, sort of back into the mix, a little bit more old school, because I think that ends up being a differentiator, right? So my argument would be, use the tools to help define an audience, use the tools to get more organized, use the tools to look for patterns in data that will help guide you as to who you should be talking to. But when it comes time to talk to those people, actually talk to those people, because that I think is the differentiator, particularly with certain demographics. I think there's a bit of a cliche example, but the concept of handwritten thank you notes, right? As a just a broad example. I mean, that's so jarring now. If you received a letter, right, wouldn't that make that person who wrote the letter like stick in your mind? It doesn't even matter what the letter says. Almost, it's like, I got this. thing from this person, right? They took the time to do this, right? And so I think I ideally, like what I would advise to my clients is, you know, a healthy hybrid of both of those things is really going to be the killer combination moving forward. Because I think you bring up a really interesting point about differentiation. I think ultimately, um, it used to be, you probably know more about this than I do, but content on your website, for example, has always been really important for things like SEO and the attractiveness of your website and gaining ranking and so on and so on, keywords. But a lot of that depended on the fact that you were willing to do the writing of the blogs, to do the writing of a new section of your website. Well, now with help from the tools, which are, I think, very necessary, and I think a good idea, but that's kind of leveled the playing field, right? So if I was a really good writer of that kind of content, well, now it doesn't, there's a lot of people who could do that with help, right, from the tools very well, and the stuff looks great. So we've kind of like that's sort of been taken off the table a little bit, right? And now it's other things like, so what else are you going to do to differentiate yourself in a world where you can rise up to the level of your competitor because you have these opportunities with things like AI. And again, I always want to be really careful. I'm not at all suggesting that AI tools or these are not bad things. They're great tools. I think we're saying the same thing. It's just the way that you use them, I think, could help you really differentiate yourself, or it could put you in the mundane and you look like everybody else. I think that's the rub.
1,000%. Because what is our job as a marketing professional? To stand out from the crowd, to be the signal in the noise. And if you are just adding to the noise, then you're going to get lost in the sea of that noise. And I think in that quest of, I just had this debate with somebody who I do respect, but our philosophies are totally different. Right now, he's flooding the internet with thousands of AI generated articles. He's trying to play that game,
Mm-hmm.
right? I just interviewed right before you a gentleman who works with Wikipedia. He's got a large consulting agency around Wikipedia. And if you are in the SEO business at all, you know that AI, the LLMs, are plucking from Wikipedia more than they're plucking from blogs and other platforms. They're plucking from Reddit more than other platforms. And why are they doing that? Because they know that content's been there, it's seasoned, that and we might talk about this at the conference. There's a lot of marketers right now getting their asses handed to them because they all flooded over to Reddit knowing this is happening. But it's a whole different world and a whole different culture on a place like Reddit. Same with
Yeah.
Wikipedia. You and I can't just jump on Wikipedia and write an article and push it out and publish it. There's a whole group of people and a bunch of different parameters that have to be met to put that out. So they're going out finding that content. They're not pushing the 1,000 articles every 5 seconds that are going out. So I think
Mm-hmm.
people need to understand that. All AI is going to do, if you're lazy, creating slop, you're just going to do it at scale. But
Yeah.
you're not
Yeah.
going to move it forward. I'm taking and I'm teaching the little bit slower path. I want you to bring all your wisdom to the table and use these tools to amplify you, your client, whatever it is that you're doing, and not get lost in the sea of noise. You are the signal, and that signal comes from your wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think, we were talking a little bit about the concept of relativity earlier, and I think what happens is that we tend to look at other people, other companies, both professionally in our daily lives, whatever, and we say, how did they achieve that? How did that guy, manage to get XYZ, or why are they so popular, and whatever the case is. And I think maybe the easiest way to say, there's always more to the story, right? And so it's things like, sure, it's, they're flooding to your point, they're flooding the market with content. Let's say they're getting lots of clicks, but their profitability is terrible, right? Whatever it is that they're selling, right? Just because, it's one of those, just because you can doesn't mean you should,
Right.
kind of things. And so I think there's that danger. I think that's a natural human thing, is to look at what the other guy's doing, but look at it critically, and don't be, overly wowed by something until you know all the facts, which, sometimes you can figure that out, sometimes you can't. But I think that's a really good point, is don't, and don't beat yourself up either, just because, you're seeing something out there, because again, there's probably more to that story. I think the points you've made, I think, in terms of really, getting to know the tools that are out there and how they can help you, and I think really spending some time, um, to learn more about this whole arena, whether it's AI or anything else. Um, I think that's the other tendency, is we see stuff and we just, either we just grab onto it and start using it without really sort of doing the research and learning more about the platform, et cetera. Or sometimes we don't latch onto it at all. So it's sort of an all or nothing thing for a lot of people. I'm going to jump into AI and do this, that, and the other thing, or I'm just overwhelmed and I'm not going to do anything. I think the commitment of spending time to understand it, to research, to see what tools, there's, when you first started talking about this stuff, there were X number of tools in, in a very short period of time. Now there's triple the number of tools. Well, they can't all be good. They can't all do what you want them to do. You got to spend some time. It's, it's work. It's work.
Yeah, what I always tell people, look at the two or three things that you just don't really enjoy doing in your workflow. Right? What are those things? You don't enjoy them, or they just take way too long and you'd like to find a way to speed them up. Then as you start understanding that workflow, now I'm going to go look for that minimum viable toolkit that's going to help me fix that. It could be creating an AI agent that goes out and does work for you. It could be just installing Copilot and just writing better emails. It just depends on what it is that you want to accomplish with that tool. Now, I
Yeah.
just did a talk at the Indiana Filmmakers AI Summit, and I put up a screen. I didn't even realize it. It was my stack of AI tools that I'm using to generate some of these videos. I didn't even realize it was that large. So I understand why it's so intimidating, and I'll put a photo of that stack up right now. But it is overwhelming for people. But look, the number one piece of advice I think, and hopefully we get this across to at Marcon, is it doesn't matter how many tools we talk about or any of that. The two most important pieces, in my humble opinion, are one, work on yourself, your emotional intelligence, your soft skills, your ability to ask questions, to understand business systems, human behavior, all those different types of things, right? That's number one. And then number two, just master something like ChatGPT or Gemini. Just start there, really get comfortable there before you get overwhelmed by going with 58,000 tools, because just ChatGPT alone, as of we're recording this, Sora 2 was just released yesterday. You can do text, you can do killer images, and you can do amazing video.
Yeah.
That should keep you very busy for quite a while in just ChatGPT alone.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. And as you, and then to your point, maybe as you start to think about applying, how could AI, help me with, in data insights and so on, then maybe that's, once you've got that first thing mastered, then, what tool would help me with that data piece? Is it
Right.
ChatGPT? Is it something else? And again, with the guardrails that we talked about earlier, be careful what you're using it on. But yeah, I think it makes perfect sense.
So let's close on a couple of different things here, real quick. Somebody going to Marcon, who should go? Only marketers? Should other people go just to learn things? Who should be attending this conference?
That's a great question. Ultimately, we were really trying to appeal to marketers, in central Indiana. However, I think that there are a host of folks within the community that would benefit, from being there. I think to some degree, I think IT folks who work with, with the marketing staff will get something out of it. I think folks in communications in general, whether that's public relations, media relations. When we say marketing nowadays, it means something I think very different than it did 10 years ago. There's a lot, and vice versa. Like I think my daughter graduated from Butler with a degree in strategic communications. Okay, when I was in school, that was not that's not
Right.
what it was called, right? I think I tease her and say that's a fancy word for marketing, but there's so many things underneath that umbrella. I think that would all benefit. So I would cast a wide swath. I think if you're in accounting, you're probably not going to be particularly enthused by this conference. You're welcome, but the intent is probably under that communications umbrella.
And you've worked in communications for a long time, going really, I think, most of your career, from what I could tell. And now
Yeah.
you're with Schneider Communications Group, your company, your consulting. Who do you work with? Like, who is your perfect client? If somebody right now is listening, watching this, appeal to them. Who do you want to work with?
So I think where I can have the most sort of positive effect are small to medium sized businesses that struggle with that sort of that grind of making sure that their communications and their marketing and so on are aligned and on a schedule, and that they're targeting the right audiences to help them grow their revenue. So often what happens is and I watched it when I was president at Wheaton Worldwide Moving. We had 350 agents in our network. They're all small to medium sized. There's a few larger businesses, and the thing that I saw over and over and over again was that the path that they had laid out was to do this regular communication and do have great marketing ideas that they would execute on a monthly basis, all that kind of stuff. And then the first thing that happens is that in their case, when somebody was late or when a truck had a problem or whatever, the marketing stuff goes right out the window, right? Because they have to shift their focus, and now nobody's looking after that. And so to bring me in to help create a strategic plan underneath that marketing umbrella, and to put things in place to make sure that those get executed, whether that's me doing the execution for them or my team, or just making sure that the right people are doing that and helping them on a monthly basis. Those are kind of ideal clients, not necessarily in transportation, but really any small to medium sized business. And then the other piece is after many years of doing sales training and business development training and so on, that's where the other areas where I can help. So love to come in and speak to sales teams, different organizations where I can kind of bring some advice and some wisdom from all those years doing that training and seeing it in the wild. Yeah, that's where I'd love to help.
And the key word I want you folks to take from that: wisdom, not knowledge, wisdom. He's bringing the wisdom to the table. So, okay, I'll have AJ's information and, of course, Marcon's event and everything in the show notes. So make sure you check out in the show notes or description or wherever you're watching or listening to this for that info. Now, let's end on a speed round. So I'm
All
going to
right.
ask you 5 questions, either
Uh-oh.
one word or yes or no or one sentence type of very fast answers. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
AI, opportunity or threat?
Opportunity.
Best marketing campaign you've ever seen?
I'm going to go with some of the early Apple um, computer ones. I'm trying to think of the name. I think it was like the Apple IIe, or I can't remember which model, but some of the early Apple computer stuff was phenomenal.
What's overhyped in marketing and communications right now?
I'm gonna say, uh, okay, this is gonna get me in trouble. It's gonna have to be a little bit more than one word. I'm gonna say the use of social for business development at the expense of real life networking?
This is a good one. This is a controversial one. Creativity versus data. Which one wins?
Mm. So I love that. I love this question. I think that ultimately it's still going to be creativity. And if I could, I'll just say I think that we have a tendency to get paralyzed by the data at the expense of creativity. Obviously, it should be a healthy balance of the two. The data should help drive your decision making. But at the end of the day, really good creative should attract uh, an audience.
And the last question, what is one main thing that you want every attendee at MARCON to walk away with?
The one thing I would say for the MARCON attendees is that that Central Indiana is chock full of some of the best marketers in the country, and that we, you know, despite the fact that we're out here in the cornfield, that you couldn't have a more vibrant place to be in the marketing business, regardless of what your subject matter is. There's so many talented people here, and I think that people who come to the conference will experience that 100%.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We'll get all of this pushed out. MARCON, I'm excited to sit in on your panel. This has been incredible. Like I said, it was a good conversation, right?
Absolutely, it was the best. This was so much fun. I really appreciate your having me on.
I told you that was going to be good. Well, I'm very excited about MARCON. I'm very honored that Jamie Shook invited me to come in and participate on the panel. Make sure if you're a marketing professional, go check out AMA Indy, join the chapter. It is absolutely worth your time to do that. If you are interested in marketing at all, make sure to come to MARCON Indy. And I think that's it. So if you found value in this video, please hit that subscribe button, like button, bell notification button. And I think that's it. My name is Harrison Painter. This has been the AI for Everyone podcast. And until next time, keep creating, keep innovating. Most importantly, keep up. God bless.
Thanks for listening. I'm glad you stayed. One more spark for the plans you've made. If this show hit, go share the vibe. Like, subscribe, let's build this tribe. Been blazing trails, now I'm building new. Launch ready's live, and the work is true. No hype, no bull, no vaporware. Just real results and a voice that cares.
Keep creating, feel that spark. Keep innovating, leave your mark. The eye moves fast, don't miss the cut. Keep creating, keep innovating, and most importantly, keep up.
Thank you for your support. See you next